Hi, I'm Cheryl Kagan, very proud to be the Senator for Gaithersburg and Rockville. Welcome to this week's edition of Kibbitzing with Kagan, brief conversations with people I find fascinating. Today's special guest is Damian O'Doherty, and he is a longtime political PR and podcast, triple P, threat in all three ways. And we're going to have a great conversation. Damian, thank you so much for taking time to chat today.
It's an honor to be here, Senator Kagan. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So I'm going to dive right into and start with your background. You grew up as a Marylander between the two beltways, the DC and Maryland Beltway. You went to University of Delaware and then got a law degree at University of Baltimore. You were student government president at University of Delaware. Very cool. Was there anyone in your family who was into politics or law? How did you start your way on that journey?
Great question. Actually, quite the opposite. I would stay with a family who is in Maryland politics, and actually, David Youngman. He's a Republican councilman in Howard County. I would go over to his family's house in fourth grade. His brother is my best friend, and I would go over there in fourth grade and spend the night. And the family was the most vibrant family, and they were always having these political discussions. I came from a very quiet household somehow. So I saw this family just sort of exploding with political debate and was just entranced by it and thought it was such a cool family thing to have. So I cursed generations of my own after that.
So how did you choose to become a Democrat? If your earliest
Probably, yeah, I would blame that on another Howard County, in which is I was just began working in the legislature for the Baltimore City Senators, and I wanted to be the Maryland Higher Education Commission student member from my law school.
Yep.
Well, and long story short, Ken Allman, the
Yep.
Howard County executive, said, "Damian, this is a Democratic state. I mean, what are you doing being a Republican? You're never gonna get ahead at all."
He was right.
I teased him. I might have been, if I stuck with it, I might have been on the board of regents under like Ehrlich or Hogan or something. But fortunately,
Republican governors. Yes.
yeah, fortunately, I was shown the light. Also, I was in law school reading, Justice Scalia's dissents, and he had like a real hard and fast black and white, no gray view of the law, which at my outset of my law career was very intoxicating. Like, just, that must be the answer. But after working with the city senators and working in the Senate of Maryland and just seeing all the issues that came to bear, it was hard to reconcile that sort of black and white with the real gray I was seeing every day in Maryland. And so ever since then, I've been a Democrat.
That's great.
Thanks, Ken.
So, yeah, Ken Ullman, one of the very talented Maryland leaders, and was a nominee for lieutenant governor. Would have been great if he won. You came to work for the Senate of Maryland, as you said, and you worked on my committee, education, formerly called Education, Health, and Environmental Affairs. What sort of issues did you work on, and what did you observe? What did you see in the Senate that left an imprint on you?
For me, that was very special because our chairman was Clarence Blount, and he was very close with Senate President Miller, as you recall. And I had Brian Frosch and Senator Paula Hollinger were also subcommittee heads on that.
Let me just interrupt for a second. So Clarence Blount was just the dean of the Senate, a tall, elegant African-American man who has since passed. Brian Frosch went on to chair a committee in the Senate, the Judicial Proceedings Committee, and then served so brilliantly as our state's attorney general. And Paula Hollinger became chair of the committee and since has retired from the Senate just before I got there. So just for folks who may not know who those folks are.
So what I learned from all of them, especially Chairman Blount, because he set the tone, was this idea about comportment, which is how a senator comports themselves when they're dealing with constituents, when they're dealing with people giving testimony, when they're dealing with other senators. And it was just an education in that experience about what it means to be in the Senate of Maryland, one of the oldest Democratic bodies there is, right?
Right.
It's an amazing thing to be a part of. And and Clarence Blount was just this, as you said it so well, elegant,
Yes.
just an elegant West Baltimore Democrat who was a sharecropper's son. I think he was the first to get a college education in his family and became a teacher, was a
Yes.
veteran.
Yeah.
So just an awesome force to watch. And it is, you have those people in your body today, I'm sure, that just kind of the way they hold themselves and their presence in the body
Mm.
literally has an impact on how other people carry themselves.
Nice. I love that. I'd have to think about who that might be. So you worked for the Realtors, and then you worked for a former Baltimore County exec, Jim Smith, and a law firm and all that. Former Governor Martin O'Malley ran for president, and you were his chair. Talk about your relationship with our former governor and why you thought he could be leader of the free world in 2016 when we ended up with Donald Trump.
Well, it was that time where I was in the Senate. There were 300 plus murders a year happening, and it was difficult for me to understand how that could happen there. And if there were 3 murders in Howard County
Mm.
or any other county, like it would be the top attention of the day. And it just didn't seem to carry that. Martin O'Malley would come down to the Senate as a city council person, and he would have problems with a lot of the policing strategies going on at that time. And he just looked like a real hero to me.
Yeah.
And he had some of the same beguiling questions that I did. And then our families went back several generations. So my grandfather and his father-in-law were friends. Joe Curran was the longest serving attorney general in the in Maryland. And my grandfather Patrick O'Doherty was good friends with him. His
Nice.
law partner was the city council president in Baltimore City.
Very
So
incestuous, very
yes,
interconnected.
you got it. Yes.
Um, so that is a long history of interconnections. So talk about the presidential campaign. Did you ever go to Iowa, New Hampshire, or anywhere else?
I did. And what I learned about Iowa in Maryland and DC, when you grow up in that sort of political situation, you can really get away with knowing 3 things very well, right? I think Ann Richards taught us this. My partner worked for Ann Richards, and she said, if you give,
And
right, the former governor of Texas, she said, if you give people 2 things, they won't quite think you're in command of it. If you say 4 things, they might get a little confused. So it's always 3 things. And she always joked that George Bush was better than her, was the only person better than her, George W. Bush, at getting down to 3 things because he couldn't count to 4, was always her joke. I know you have a nonpartisan kind of audience, but I had to slide that one in.
nah. So yeah, go ahead.
So back to just 3 things. When you go to Iowa, you have to know 20 things, and they're everything that they know 10 issues deep in each one of those 20 categories of expertise. And so that was a whole nother level of politics for me to understand. It was probably why I was best suited just to help lead the super PAC.
Yes.
Which in retrospect was probably not a good idea. I think Bernie Sanders got a lot of traction off of of being the candidate without the super PAC.
Mm.
So I learned quite a bit.
Interesting.
But you know all this stuff better than I ever did or would.
In 2016, I left Rockville. No, sorry. In December of 2007, I left Rockville on Christmas Day and took a circuitous route, stopping at state capitals, because I have now finished all 50, on my way to drive to Iowa to do Get Out the Vote in January of 2008, Get Out the Caucus for Hillary Clinton in 2008. And it was sub-zero temperature with the wind chill. It was so freezing, but it was thrilling. It was so inspiring to be in Iowa because those voters are so damn important. And now we're shifting, and South Carolina is going to be first next year, as you know, because Iowa doesn't reflect the diversity of our party or of our country.
We're the organization, right? I mean, they just lost a lot of credibility last time around. I hope they find a way back at it.
Yeah. So let's shift to podcasts, because that's the primary reason that I wanted to bring you on. But I wanted to give folks a sense of your background too. So I got a call from a friend saying, Kagan, you're a good speaker and you should have a podcast. And I thought he was nuts. And 4 hours later, I called him back with the name of the podcast, Kibbitzing with Kagan, a logo, and my first guest, who was a 7-year-old constituent who started an anti-bullying nonprofit and stuff, Kavanaugh Bell. And that was 3 years ago. And so it's crazy. So how did you decide to get into podcasts? And you've had 2 of them, the conference call and the lobby. Talk about your journey. How did you start and why? And what do you hope that people get out of them?
Great questions. I'm in public affairs. So basically, if you're reading the news in Maryland, there's a good chance that we're involved in that story somehow. And we're trying to influence public opinion. You know, the lobbyists, they're trying to get your vote, Senator. We're out there dealing with the atmospheric. So the media, the coalitions, the business groups, the social media, all that sort of stuff we're trying to organize. And in that role over 15 years of KO Public Affairs, I've just learned to try to become the best advisor I can be to CEOs and university presidents, all those kind of people that we represent. I try to be a resource for them, much like a crash test dummy. In other words, I will never recommend that my client go on a podcast or host a podcast or do a live Facebook feed or I won't ever recommend something to a client unless I myself do it. And that's really why I wanted to start podcasting. I deeply believe that social media, and I include podcasting in that the power of that is that you can connect every day with the people that made you who you are today. And so, like, I used to want to be a big star, right, on social media. I think everybody has that inclination. But if you're consistent enough, I think you learn you can serve your own community so dutifully that opportunities just keep coming up just because you're in there, you're sort of entertaining them, you're keeping them informed. In your case, you're providing some value to your network. And I think, the idea, if I could have been at McGinn's or Mick O'Shea's in Baltimore City every Friday and had a crowd of 300 people listen to me talk for 45 minutes, I would have cried on your shoulder and told you I was the greatest of all time. But, now you can have an audience like that, even if it's, a couple hundred people or 1,000 people. That's a dream. And they listen to you, Senator, they're listening to your whole podcast while they're doing other things, because you're adding value. And so that's why I wanted to check it out, because I thought my clients could use it to inform their employees, their customers. And then I just couldn't believe we could call it work to record conversations with our friends and important people. And that would be considered, part of the job. So it's a dream in that regard, right?
So how do you decide who you'd like to interview?
That's a great question. Again, sorry to keep louding your question. I would say the key for me has been understanding that the more I try to make it about KO Public Affairs, or the more I try to force my clients into being on a podcast, the less great it is. In fact, I kind of one of my podcasts, I kind of killed the audience because I let them do 3 straight episodes. And my audience was like, dude, we like one, but we don't need 3 of your client, Right. So that balance is difficult to find. I would say now I try to serve the part of the Maryland political community that may not get, on Jeff Salkin or on on Channel 7 or in the Washington Post or something.
That's all in State Circle on Maryland Public Television.
Sorry.
Does a
Yeah.
great job. 30-minute show every Friday night, and you can catch it online as well. How much preparation do you do? How much research do you do before hosting a podcast? And how much are the questions sort of predetermined versus organic?
I would say very little preparation. Preparation kind of makes me nervous.
Ah,
Yeah. I'm a little bit different than you in that respect. And I'm known for being sort of a very straightforward, authentic person. And sometimes my preparation belies that. I
okay.
can come off. I have a bit of a prosecutorial tone. And so I find like the more armed I go into a conversation, the more rigid that tone becomes. And it's the worst thing.
Ah,
So I just try to keep things as loose as possible. We're in a very serious business where
right.
people have a ton of chances to get their
Yeah.
points across. I really want to learn, like, how did you get in the lobby? How did you get into politics? And I think that's what our audience wants as well.
Well, speaking of lobbying, I listened to your interview with Joe Bryce, President Miller's former chief of staff, who is a partner in one of the top lobbying firms in Annapolis, and it was terrific and very, very casual and friendly, and gave him a lot of room. And you asked a lot of good questions, so I enjoyed it.
When you say that, I think maybe I am like I dreamed of doing that Joe Bryce podcast while I was running, a couple miles, or while I was doing sports, or like, I've thought about it, what it would be like to interview Joe Bryce
Love it.
or Senator Kagan. Like I think about this at weird
Oh,
times, and then when I
standard.
actually get them on there, I can.
And just for the record here, I'm going to be a guest on Damian O'Doherty's podcast. We're recording it soon, so check that out. Who is a dream guest that you haven't had on yet? But if you could have anyone, who would you want?
I would love to have Governor Wes Moore on,
I thought that would be your answer, actually.
but
Okay.
I don't know that I don't know that I would be able to do it right, and I think I might be, a little too much of a tout. I think a big thing in politics and PR and public affairs that people miss out is two things. One is to be a witness. In our careers, we just get to be a witness to incredible careers. Right? I'm witnessing one with Senator Kagan. I've seen it I remember you in 1999 being up on the stage with Mayor Martin O'Malley. I mean, I've seen you my whole career. That's a special thing, is that witness capability that I never thought would be any kind of superpower.
Nice.
And then I think the other thing we can do is be touts, which is, it's hard being governor. It's hard being a state senator. You really don't, even at the gubernatorial level, the mayor level, the state senator level, the congressional level, you don't have like 150 people that at the drop of the hat will go online and like everything you need. Or, it's hard to find people that can keep the spirit of service going.
Right.
And that's the way I would be with Moore, which may not be a great podcast.
I think he's great and you're great regardless. But before we leave this section of the conversation, any tips for me or others who have podcasts? What's the secret to having a podcast be interesting to people and to get viewers or listeners?
For you, Senator, I would say that any chance for people to understand, the depth and breadth of which you approach issues, like the 911 issue. I'm sure your folks have listened to that and understand that, but they will have no idea how much confidence they should have in you until you start sharing all the different dynamics about that one issue. I think the best way you do that is through your network, and the answer to everything you're going to have, as my coach Matt Sitter says, is going to be in your network. So the more you dig into your network, Senator, and what you love, the more your podcast dimensionality will grow, I think.
That's really interesting. Thank you. I have a few more areas of questions and before we get to our Fast Five. You referenced KO Public Affairs. That includes NFL teams and businesses and all sorts of folks. And the State Board of Elections. I'm wearing my vote pin today because the day we're recording this is the day we finally are getting Maryland's new administrator of elections. And you guys have done PR marketing, getting people to vote, and that's great. Talk about how you choose your clients, and are there any clients you won't take?
That's a very challenging question. I think it depends where you are in your public affairs career. I think early on in our career, we were more likely to take on battles that today we might not take on. And you learn a lot both ways. I took on a big project that my former boss, the county executive of Baltimore County, was against. I think I took on 2 of those. You know, if I could dial back time, I would not take those 2 clients, even though I probably learned so much from that experience. So I think, I think we've been in it for 15 years. Just KO Public Affairs is our 15th anniversary. So we can be a lot more selective. And I think when you're at 15 years, your bigger concern is, are your clients in conflict with one another and measuring issues like that.
Any clients you won't take for political or ethical reasons?
Yes, but I would love to handle those. A lot of what we do is getting people that have made enormous mistakes in the public realm to, you mentioned an NFL football player. I've had NFL athletes in terrible situations, and they were at very big redemptive moments, and they made them. And I think the world's a better place. I'm a better place. They're in a better place. But had I not taken a little risk with some of those clients that are in crisis, I wouldn't have learned as much. So I would like to not sort of say, oh, I won't take any oil and gas. I won't take any, but I would rather deal with it one-on-one on each issue, because you learn so much just going through each conflict check, each opportunity.
All right. So U.S. Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas, former President Donald Trump, call KO, right? Okay. For those who are unfamiliar with Center Maryland, we can't wrap up without talking about Center Maryland. Talk about what that is and why people should check it out.
Thanks. The centermaryland.org really is this idea. It may be a little bit out of date in a sense, because we thought 11 years ago that there was a lack of news coverage of what was going on in Maryland public affairs. And we knew we had the Post and the Sun, and you had a bunch of regional papers. And we thought if we aggregated all their news, it would be a resource to all our people. And remember, when we got all our learnings from the Senate of Maryland. When I first worked in the Senate of Maryland, we had a clipping service I talked to you about with Joe Bryce, right?
A clipper.
Yeah, we had the clipper, which is literally you would sit there and cut and paste and clip articles from all over the state and bundle them, photocopy them, and then give them to each Senate office at the end of the week, right? So
during session every day. And it was
every day,
60, 70, 80 pages of articles. Yeah.
So that's really the idea. And I think, Senator, in my life, public affairs, your life, politics and governance, legislative work, if you can be the person that sets the morning agenda with the news, in other words, if you're the person that sends the email to the client or to the principal and says, these are the 7 articles you ought to check out today, you're setting the agenda without even, opening your mouth. And then you're at the center of what happens that whole day. So that's my first advice to young people getting into politics is master the news of the day and make sure your people have access to it like nobody else.
I love that. That's really smart. Crystal ball, the Moore Miller administration. You already referenced our fabulous governor, Wes Moore, and Lieutenant Governor Aruna Miller. What is your biggest hope for their administration? What is your biggest fear? What do you worry about? And predict the future there briefly.
So I believe that their biggest strength is this is going to sound so cheesy. This is why I can never do a podcast with Governor Moore. Governor Moore has a exceedingly rare capacity to open people's hearts and minds to a collaborative cause
Mhm.
and get them to sort of put themselves out there a little bit more. He does it with his hugs, right? I mean,
Yep.
you've seen the stiffest person in Maryland politics warm up to his hug, right? But he does that, for example, with me and this service experience that he's talking about, the statewide initiative on service becoming the state of service. To me, that means going back to my home community in West Baltimore and figuring out ways that I can use all these trade crafts that we're talking about today to help lift up all the servants in West Baltimore and to make West Baltimore the capital of service in Maryland and the country, because it needs the most service. It has the most service. It's a beautiful place to sort of show that. And so
I'm going to push the pause button to make sure everyone knows what you're talking about, because I've worked closely with Secretary Paul Montero on this. The SERVE Act created the first of its kind in the nation, a service year option for young people, high school graduates, or those with a GED, or within the first 3 years at a school. And it's basically a 9-month paid option, service option in a nonprofit organization, for-profit or government agency, really getting a deep dive, and then also having soft skills about showing up on time and dressed appropriately and communicating with your supervisor, with financial literacy and money management. And it's going to be an extraordinary opportunity for the first class, which is being selected now, actually. And we're going to have 250 people who are going to be very lucky and have extraordinary opportunities. First in the country, Governor Wes Moore.
So, and you were the first person in the Senate of Maryland to endorse him, one of the first?
So I was the first legislator outside of Baltimore City to endorse Wes Moore in a 12-person race in the fall of 2021, before the July 2022 primary election. And as a white Jewish woman senator from Montgomery County, it was kind of a big deal. And he loved to say that Senator Kagan endorsed me when I was at 1% in the polls, and that was probably a rounding error. And now he's our governor, and I am so proud.
See, Rockville, she's got you. She's got you. She's got it figured out before it happens. Yeah. And so you just described beautifully how to take a vision for something and then turn it into, actionable law, and then actual administrative governance that's seeking to, I guess, just really scale service across the state, right? And for me, it's just like when I hear West, and I think a lot of other people do, just in the non-legislative level, he's like, West gave up all this money, this huge career. That guy was going to be in Vogue magazine, whether or not he was the governor of Maryland, right?
But now they are in Vogue magazine.
Right. I mean, but he didn't need this job. And so every time I see him, I just think, like, if Wes gave all this up to serve my native state, what can I do? What can I do to just do 1/100th of what he's doing? And I think a lot of people see and feel that. And that's the most special thing about him. And that's why you'll see people all over the country say, come on out here to talk. We want you out here.
Yeah. Anything you fear, anything you worry about them failing at or falling down?
Well, this little trick where it seems like, the Democrats, sorry, I know this is nonpartisan, but the Democrats
it's totally partisan.
Okay. The Democrats put the House in order, and it takes difficult choices. Everybody's got a chore to do. Everybody chips in. And then we give it over to a Republican governor, and then, everything deteriorates. It goes back. And so, we're in a constant state of cyclical kind of cleanup as opposed to always moving forward. We saw that in Baltimore with a huge transit line, right? Just said, no, we're not going to have a multi-billion-dollar transit line. But that decision has huge impacts,
Sure.
And so my fear for Governor Moore and Lieutenant Governor Miller is that they have to, there's so much, this stadium deal with the Orioles, that should have been done in the last administration. They have to come in here and clean up. So there's so much cleanup we didn't elect him to be a janitor. We elected him to be a governor that's going to pull kids out of poverty. And so I just want them to do the best they can cleaning up the prior administration, but also stay focused on advancing.
Love it, love it, love it. So you have been spending more and more time in Colorado. What do you miss most about Maryland when you are out there?
I miss everything about it. It's been the most special thing to get distance or space from my home state. I went all the way to the University of Delaware from Maryland for college. So I never really went out of state. And when candidly O'Malley, we didn't catch fire anywhere. And the Larry Hogan administration came on board, just seemed, and Donald Trump to the White House. That was a lot of shock for me. And my daughter is fantastic. She at the time was a leukemia survivor, is to this day. And I just felt like my family could use a narrative shift. So we moved our family in pursuit of our kids' dreams to be great skiers. And when you're at that distance, you see Maryland in a different spot. In fact, in Baltimore, I see so many people doing amazing things that I've gotten a little traction just becoming a connecting point. Like, hey, West Baltimore organization, did you see that Ascension St. Agnes Hospital is doing this? Did you see that Coppin State University is doing this? Did you see the Baltimore Banners? And so if you pull yourself out of your hometown a little bit, you can get kind of an air traffic controller's view, which in public affairs has been very helpful. So it's been a big net win, and we'll be back as soon as my 10-year-old finds herself on the U.S. ski team. We'll be back.
Perfect. All right. Well, Damian O'Doherty, it is time for Fast Five. 5 quick questions, 5 quick answers. Question number 1: who is a political figure that you admire most?
The Honorable Thomas V. Mike Miller, Jr.
Good answer. The late Senate president, longest serving in Maryland's history and the nation's history. Question 2. Most people ask for the best. I want to ask for the worst show or movie that you've seen recently.
Ooh. My daughters are watching some terrible stuff right now. Something about the year is about a 14-year-old girl that all of a sudden becomes like the talk of the town, and all the boys are attracted to her. I can't remember the name, but that is the worst.
Okay.
As a father of 2 daughters, that's the worst. I don't want to see that.
I have to give props to some of my interns who come up with some of these questions. I changed some of them.
I did love Barbie, though, but that's another question.
Barbie was amazing. If a movie were going to be made about your life, who would star as Damian O'Doherty? Or who would you want to star as you?
Oh, I would love Philip Seymour Hoffman if he was still around. I would love Matthew McConaughey, but I would think everybody would I think you're more Philip Seymour Hoffman, buddy. As you saw from me, not able to keep eye contact with the audience here,
Question 4: what is your favorite sport to play or watch?
My favorite sport to play is you don't actually play it, but it's called boxing. And I'm an amateur boxer, and I'm not that good, but I compete. And it's the most challenging thing I've ever done in my life, and that's why I love it.
Dang. And you always wear headgear so you're not getting concussions and long-term health problems.
I certainly do. Yes.
Okay. Last question. Damian O'Doherty, KO Public Affairs, Center, Maryland, and all that and more. What is your hidden secret superpower? What is a skill or talent you have, something you're really good at that most folks can't do?
I would say my chief job in life is to take care of people and make them laugh. And that, if I can stay focused on taking care of people and making them laugh, I'm going to be a valued member of our society.
That's fabulous. I love that. I love that. Well, Damian, what a joy it's been to chat with you. Thank you so much for your time. And thanks for all the ways that you have been engaged over many years now in politics and policy in Maryland.
Well, thank you for the exemplar you've given us, and your eternal youth is a big bright spot for us. I think a lot of us think if we stay moving like Senator Kagan and at the center of all the issues, we will remain eternally in our 30s, just
Thank
like
you.
Senator Kagan.
Yeah. Well, I will take the compliment, and I will also say I've got lighting. So, thank you, Damian. I look forward to seeing you before too long. Stay well.